Hi everyone, welcome to a new video with me, Jenny Marples, otherwise known as Buttons. Today I want to take you through using Wendy Vecchi's embossing paste and actually adding colour to it. This is the white one. Okay, as you can see, I do rather like this stuff, and I've had a couple of questions recently about how to use it with colour. So I thought I'd address that in this video. So to start off with, I've cut a piece of paper from the French Industrial range by Tim Holtz. I've started by using Faded Jeans Distress ink just blending it on with my blending tool onto the piece of paper. Now the next thing is that I am going to be using a stencil. I'm going to be using embossing paste, but over the top, that will be purely for background. Over the top I actually do want to apply some flowers which I've made. I've actually made these in advance and I'll take you through that shortly. But in order to work out whereabouts I'm going to put them, rather than second guess, I've actually got a rubber stamp here, it's an indigo blue stamp, Blazing Poppies. It's the large one. And I love this because it gives you a composition for your flowers, a way of having a bouquet without having to work out whereabouts you're going to put the flowers afterwards. I'll show you what I mean. So, I've got my very favourite watering can, archival ink, which I'm going to use over the stamp. Let's move it so you can see. Just generally all over the stamp, making sure it's all completely covered. I love the detail on this stamp. But actually, as I said, it's not really being used for the detail this time. So, work out roughly whereabouts I want it to go. So, I'm looking to create something of a triangle formation in this. So, just pressing down. But there we are. So let's see how that's come out. Right, okay. You don't know how much of this you can see. The detail is now on there. Let's give my stamp just a quick rub. The detail is now on there, but the idea isn't, and I said before, don't want to make this too blurry. The idea isn't that this stamp actually stands out. The idea is that this stamp is there so that I know whereabouts I'm going to place my flowers. Next thing, the stencil. This is a lovely new one from the Funky Junky Boutique. If you've never paid a visit, I highly recommend it. Linda has a knack for having in stock some of the most gorgeous items. And this is a new acquisition. It's a Prima Damask stencil and I love it. So I'm just placing that over the top. As I said, I was careful with my measurements. That 14.8 centimetres was done so that I could ensure that the stencil covered the whole area completely. As you can see, I'm actually using, well, it's washi tape I'm using, just to hold the stencil in place. When you're doing quite an intricate design, especially if you're going to cover the whole thing, I really do recommend that you actually hold your stencil down in this way, because there's nothing worse than trying to be fiddly with your paste and having to hold your stencil down at the same time, and if it moves you can ruin the effect, especially when you've got a detailed stamp like this, stencil like this. So, securely held in place. Now then, let's move the inks out the way. Down to business. Embossing paste. Now actually you don't need an awful lot of this, and unlike I've found with some pastes before now, that they can tend to dry out. You know, even on the edges of the pot, they can tend to dry out quite a lot. And you find yourself actually having paste that's not usable anymore. Wendy's is, it's like mascarpone cheese. I think that's probably the best description I can give it. Beautiful, and it will take ink so well, as I'm about to show you. Got a very small blob here on the side of my craft mat, very tiny amount, because actually I only want to use the central part with coloured paste. So here I've got the Archival Ink Cornflower Blue. So that's this one, Archival Ink, again it's Wendy Vecchi, her Cornflower Blue colour. It works again beautifully, and I'm using it because it's a pigment ink, which means that the colour that's going to be put into the paste is going to have some depth to it. It's not just going to fade into a sort of pale white mash. So I start off literally by applying one drop and starting to mix it. You can add more if you want to, but I tend to prefer, oh yes, and one drop's going to do it here nicely, I think. I prefer to add one drop at a time, because then you can control the colour a lot more. Then really blend it well into your mat. As you can see, there's ink underneath as well. Now I'm just having a think about whether I've got enough paste there. I may not have been generous enough with my paste, and I really don't want to run out. So actually it's very easy if you've done that. Let's pop the nozzle back on here for a moment. It's easy enough to, as long as you've cleaned your tool, and don't be too much of a mucky pup, go in, grab a little more, and again work that in. And as you can see, it's picking up that colour beautifully. See how well that works. Now I've used the Archival ink here, and actually that has lightened it up significantly, so because I still want some depth of colour, I'll probably add another drop of the Archival ink into this. As I said, it's all about working out what you want colour wise and building up slowly. I've used the Archival ink here, but actually you can also use distress paints. Again, if you just pop a blob onto the next to your paste on the mat, you can then actually mix the two together. A word of warning, don't use too much paint. You'll end up with paste which has gone so sloppy that it will not actually stencil very well. And also I do find with the paints that the paste does tend to lighten it as well. So if you wanted a strong colour, then you're going to need to go for the darker colours from the distress paints. Now there we are, and actually that's come out really well. You'll see that now is similar to, for example, the Stormy Sky. But if I'd added Stormy Sky to that, actually it may have ended up an awful lot paler, and just keep applying paint doesn't work in quite the same way as adding the Archival ink. So now I'm ready to stencil. So I'm actually going to work, don't put too much on, and I'm actually going to apply it to the centre of my stencil. Okay, I'm just running it across, using a small amount, and again it's a matter of control. There we go. If you think I'm going to run out, don't worry, there is a plan, which you'll see fairly shortly. Okay, just scraping it through. Being gentle, because if you scrape too vigorously you can end up going through and underneath the stencil, which isn't really the plan again in this case. There we are. So that's the centre pretty much covered. But what I wanted to do, and actually try for you, this is slight experimentation here, is to actually add in some white around the edges and to have a two-tone effect with the stenciling rather than just being blue. So again, I've cleaned off my spatula because I really don't want to have blue paste in there. And again, I'm just going to add some down here and use it that way. I find again, if I add it to my craft mat, I've got more control about the amount that I'm putting on. So now I'm just almost filling in the gaps with the paste, and it's fine for it to blend in this way. In fact, I prefer it really, rather than there being harsh edges. There we go. You can see the amount of detail that there is in this beautiful stencil. I have got a real thing about stencils now, and this one in particular has become a real favourite recently, as you'll probably end up seeing on my blog. So very carefully, a little more. You'll see I'm picking up some of the colour. I need to be very careful with that. Just add another dollop there. That's it. That should about do me. Let's put that lid on. I really don't want to dry it out too much. Although, as I said, this is incredibly forgiving. So just working it in bit by bit, and you'll see that it's blending over the blue and with the blue as it goes. So this is actually working as an experiment. This is working quite well really, which is good, because it could be rather embarrassing in public otherwise, couldn't it? There we go. So just a quick swipe over just to make sure that everything is down. Every area is covered, because once that mask is lifted, there's no going back, I'm afraid. It's just too delicate a stencil. And I've tried before laying it back down again, and it's not quite worked the way I wanted to. And that's why, as I said, if you've got it taped down, you've got far more control over seeing whereabouts your paste is, but also it stops the stencil moving around and affecting the pattern. Okay, so moment of truth. Drum roll please. Here we go. Let's lift the tape off. There we go. Nearly there. Lifting very gently from the corner. There we are. At this point I'm going to stop actually recording live. It gives the chance for the paste to dry, which you don't want to watch. It also allows for the paste to soak up some of that background ink, the distress ink that I put onto the papers. It gives it more of a blended feel. It'll also give the paste the chance to dry properly. If I use a heat gun on it, the problem can be that the paste can spread a little, and that means that some of the detail is lost. Then I'll add the embellishments, those flowers that I mentioned, over the top of the areas that I've stamped, and I'll also be able to put in place some of the other embellishments that I've created for it. And then at the end of the video I'll show you some clips of the finished article, and also give you hopefully a helpful list of products that I've used. Thank you for watching.